Well, hello and welcome back to Overnight Accountants course on employee versus independent contractor. Now, in this lesson, we're going to be discussing the recourse that individuals may have who are treated as independent contractors who actually believe they are employees. So this is the options for workers who claim or believe that they are really employees of the individual or the business that paid them. Now, they have several levels of recourse. What we're going to be discussing in this lesson is federal recourse. What can they do to pose to the IRS that they are really, or make a claim to the IRS that they are really employees and not independent contractors? Two items for Internal Revenue Service purposes. One's Form 8919. This is uncollected Social Security and Medicare wages, Medicare tax on wages. This is really a form they will file with their individual return, which we'll discuss in a little bit more detail in a few moments. And they can also file with the IRS what is called Form SS8. Now, this is the more consequential of the two forms, and it has a big title. It is called Determination of Worker Status for Purposes of Federal Employment Taxes and Income Tax Withholding. Now, they also have other recourse, as we've been discussing earlier in earlier lessons. The states are really a very big concern in this. And there's other recourse they can have that will ultimately lead to the same place of being treated, possibly being treated as employees when they've been misclassified, according to the state or whoever, when they've been misclassified as independent contractors, when the state believes they are employees. And this is called non-IRS recourse. They can file unemployment. Let's say you've been paying a contractor, been treating someone as an independent contractor for quite a long time. You don't need them anymore. You let them go. And they go down to the unemployment office and make an unemployment claim. That's probably going to start a state investigation that may end up having an unemployment audit, which can ultimately result in reclassification of employees regardless. Workers' comp claim, I've seen this happen on quite a few occasions over the years where, you know, workers working for you, happens a lot in construction, but can happen in other areas, slip falls or whatever. You have an independent contractor working for you, everything is getting along great until the person falls off a roof, shoots their hand with a nail gun, goes to the hospital, can't afford the bill. Guess what? They file a workers' compensation claim saying that they are employees. Starts investigation. Possibly someone files a lawsuit on the Fair Labor Standards Act. That can start the snowball rolling also with worker reclassification as employees. And this can also oftentimes, when I've dealt with it, ends up in a class action lawsuit. Also, you can file a claim with the National Labor Relations Board, more of a union deal, but you can do that. Also, that's a potential recourse they would have. Now, let's look at the federal. That's what this is about, is the federal. I just want to make you aware of the possible state consequences and other forms of recourse that workers could have. Now, this is Form 8919. This is uncollected Social Security and Medicare tax on wages. And this form was created in 2008. And what it is generally filed by a worker who believes they're an employee. It's kind of obvious. It's filed with their worker's personal tax return, their 1040. And what this form does is it treats them like an employee for Social Security Medicare tax purposes on the tax return. So it calculates the employee share of Social Security and Medicare tax owed. And this is the amount that would have been withheld from their paycheck had they been properly treated as an employee. As you know, with W-2 wages, the employer is going to match or pay half of Social Security and Medicare, and the employee is going to pay the other half. With this, it treats an employee and they don't need to pay, I guess I should say, self-employment tax. What they're going to do is file this form and they're going to pay half that self-employment tax as though it's withheld from a paycheck. Since this form came out, it has drastically increased Form SS8 filings, which is the request for a determination, which is more consequential, but is usually found in conjunction with that. To a certain extent, as we'll discuss in a minute. Technically, what happens when it's filed is the tax that is developed or the tax that is arrived at on Form 8919 is reported on line 58 of the Form 1040, at least until 2017. Now you have all this wonderful stuff that's going to a separate schedule for the postcard tax return, which we love. And it's filed with Schedule 4, 2018 later. And what the line's called, it's unreported Social Security and Medicare tax. Generally, the form is filed in conjunction with Form SS8, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the Form 8919, they can file it when all of the following apply. Basically, taxpayer performs services for a business or a firm. They believe they're not a contractor. They were treated as a contractor, but believe they're not a contractor for purposes of Social Security and Medicare. They believe they're an employee, in other words, and the firm did not withhold as though they were an employee. So they file Form 8919 under these 3 factors, and there's also a 4th one, which actually has one of other 4 sub-reasons, and we'll discuss that here now. Now, they also, one of these other 4 reasons need to apply to file Form 8919. They've already filed an SS8 and received a determination saying they're an employee, but they haven't received a W-2 yet. They received IRS notice stating that they are an employee with the firm, so they've received some other form of notice from the IRS. They've already filed Form SS8, but they're awaiting a decision, so no decision's been made. And the final reason they could file here under these 4 other reasons to file is they've received a W-2 and an erroneous 1099 miscellaneous from the same firm. If that happens, they do not need to file Form SS8 because basically what they're saying is they already have proof they're an employee because, look, I got the W-2, I got a 1099 miscellaneous. Obviously, I'm an employee. They shouldn't send me this 1099. So you got to be very careful when you have workers performing, someone is an employee, say at a bank, I've seen this before, and then they come back later and clean the bank at night as an individual, as a contractor. They receive that 1099, they can file this 8919 without filing a Form SS8. Now, what about the Form SS8? Determination of worker status for employer independent contractor, to make a determination whether an employer independent contractor. Then put the whole title up there because it's kind of long. But Form SS8, this is created in 1994 and is part of the Determination of Worker Status program, which was created at the same time. And what SS8 does is it starts an investigation. So it actually opens the door to being scrutinized by the Internal Revenue Service. It has filed a request of determination of worker status as an employee or as an independent contractor. Now, this form can be filed by either the business or the worker. Obviously, it is most commonly filed by the worker when they feel that they're an employee. Now, the business can also file it, and what you can find is if the worker files one, you're going to receive a copy as a business owner, and you have to fill it out anyways. But the business can file it on their own, countering a worker's claim that they are an employee, or also seeking a defense. So if they can receive a determination that a worker, a particular class of workers, it's usually for an individual worker, but it applies to a class doing the same job. If they receive a determination from the Internal Revenue Service that, hey, these guys are really a contractor, they can use that as a defense in the future against claims from the same workers or class of workers claiming that they are, in actuality, employees. Now, when it's filed, the other party is going to receive an SS8 to complete. So if the worker files it, they need to be careful because now the employer is going to know that that worker filed that SS8 form, and the same is true if the business files it, the worker is going to know. So we need to be careful with other issues here, and I'm not an attorney, but if you're treating that worker poorly later or fire them or whatever over that, that can be really, you can get in trouble for that for legal purposes, not an attorney. So you're going to know who filed it as a business owner or as a business. Don't take retribution on that individual filing it, or you could have other consequences. Now, the determination only applies to federal tax matters. It is binding on the Internal Revenue Service, meaning they got to go with whatever the determination is. It's also an effective defense for the payer or the business. If it is found to be on their side, they can use it in the future as a defense for future claims. Now, what happens though also if it's found the other way, if it's found that that worker is actually an employee, it can apply to the whole class of employees. The whole class of workers can then be reclassified as employees. It can happen. All right, so here's a quick overview of SS8. You can print this out if you want to pause. If you haven't done it yet, you can take a look at the form. It's going to be in your resource section. Several pages. If you look at it closely, what you're going to find is it basically is really a relisting of the 20 common law factor test, or the 3 common law tests, the 20 factor test. You'll notice they're in there. And it covers behavioral control, financial control. You'll just be the same questions. The 20 factors are actually listed in there. Relationship with the worker and the firm, between the worker and the firm. And also there's a special section for salespeople because they can be determined to be statutory employees or non-employees, depending on the type of work that they do. IRS assumes that employee status, this is important, because the IRS is going to assume that an employee status, they're already going to sign on the employee unless they can find a compelling reason to find them an independent contractor to not be an employee. And this really comes from a case, U.S. versus Porter Livestock in 2008. What it found was basically, this is a precedent that gray areas are generally going to be decided for employee status. So you've got to be very good with the arguments, make sure you got all your ducks in a row. When you're filing Form SS8, you're going to have to complete the worker and firm information. You have to basically complete the whole form, complete it in detail. The firm, if you're filing as the firm, you're going to use a worker. I have more than one worker, that's if you're filing more than one SS8, but you're going to need to pick a worker that represents the class. If you have a lot of employees working for you, you have to pick a certain worker that they're all performing the same type of services. Pick one worker that represents the entire class, and the IRS is going to contact that worker. So they're going to have them fill out an SS8. So you may want to find an employee who likes you when you're doing this. If you're the firm filing it, let's say. Now you want to be as accurate as you can, attach additional information as needed. Your real thing here is you want to prove your point because, as I said, this is going to start an investigation, and here's kind of how the investigation goes. Worker or the employer is going to file the form. The IRS is going to contact the other party. The other party is also going to fill out their own SS8 form. The examiner is going to consider, now when they receive these SS8 forms back, they're going to consider the answers to those questions and every other relevant evidence that is submitted with the form. They're going to examine that and they're going to consider their decision on all judicial tax law and other relevant precedents in the tax law. And remember, this investigation is subjective. It's determined basically to be the examiner who's looking at it. They're going to be the ones making the decision. The result, as we've discussed over and over again, it's inconsistent opinions, which make it not black and white. It is very difficult to make these determinations based on facts and circumstances alone. So getting that determination is really important, particularly if you have a lot of employees or workers, I should say, working for you. There's no bright line between being an employee and independent contractor, but as we said, remember, they're going to side towards the status of being an employee. The IRS is, anyways. So here, if you're just some investigation tips for you, and you're going to notice here, I say professional twice in this. The form answers matter. So stylistically, the way you answer the form, the level of detail you use, using proper terms is going to matter. Terms that the IRS understands in light of case law and in light of making this determination. Hire a professional to do that if you have more than just a couple employees, because don't put yourself at risk. Be prepared to argue. Be prepared to really make your points. Remember, the other side is arguing complete opposite of what you're trying to decide. If you're the worker filing this, make sure you want to understand what an employee is. Under common law, and you want to argue those points. On the other hand, if you're a business filing this, make sure you understand those same common law factors. Make your case known. Argue your case. Be ready to argue because the other person is going to have the opposite perspective, most likely. Now, if you have more than a couple employees, that's when it gets dangerous, as I said up here, and I'm going to say here, hire a professional. It's definitely going to be worth it. So what are the results of the investigation? Well, the results of the investigation, there's several. Most common is going to be a determination letter is released. The IRS is going to send you a letter saying, hey, this is what we decided. It's called a determination letter. And this determination letter really represents a formal opinion that is binding on the IRS, as well as the employer, or let's say the business, I should say, because you don't know what determination is yet, and also the worker. So the decision is binding on all parties. There's no appeal available. So this is not like an audit or exam. Really, your only recourse in this, if you're the business, is really to file with tax court. So it's very consequential. There's no assessment of tax. The IRS does not calculate the tax for the employer. Now, I should say here, with no appeal available, if you have circumstances and, great circumstances where you have other workers performing different jobs, you may want to file another SS8. But for the same worker, there's really no appeal available from the one decision for the worker, and particularly that class. So does it get a little rough? No assessment of tax. The IRS does not calculate the tax with this. Tax for the employer, if you have a determination that a worker is actually an employee, what they're going to do is send you a letter, and here's what it states, is like, this is the IRS letter you're going to receive, determination letter, this is part of it. The SSA program does not calculate your balance due and send you a bill. You are responsible for satisfying employment tax reporting, filing, and paying obligations that result from this determination. So that basically means you're on your own, but you have to do it. We're going to discuss this in defenses or safe harbors in future lessons, but that's really up to the employer to file back tax returns, file employer tax returns, send W-2s retroactively. It's really up to the employer. You have to hire professionals and get really messy. Okay, so what are other results of the investigation? Now, they could file what is called, or send what is called an information letter. This is rare. It's just for advisory purposes only. It's really not binding. Can't help you out in other situations. They could also send a courtesy letter, which is also very, very rare. And this is for workers to prepare their personal return. So just send them like, hey, you're preparing your return. This is what we found. This is what you want to do and how to prepare your return as an employee or as a contractor. Neither one of these letters are binding. And that is really it for recourse. Now, on employee recourse and employer, how you can make a determination. We'll discuss in future lessons. We're really going to get into what happens if, unfortunately, you have workers that are reclassified as employees. What defenses do you have and what do you got to do?